Welcome to the English Department Career Day, a collaboration between the Career Center and the English Department. My name is Anne Green, and I'm a faculty member in the English Department. Throughout the day, we've invited alumni to join us for conversations about their careers in order to give you insight into different career paths, industries, and to get advice on how to enter and thrive in these fields. These sessions are being recorded. Our guest today is Lindsay Hueston. Welcome, Lindsay. Lindsay is a 2016 graduate from St. Joe's with a major in English language, literature, and letters. He works for the National Alliance to End Homelessness as an editorial specialist. Lindsay has worked at the National Alliance to End Homelessness for 4 years and started with the organization as a digital communications specialist. Prior to this, Lindsay worked at Network, the lobby for Catholic social justice, as a communications associate, and spent time with New Ways Ministry as a contributor and support coordinator for the Real Change Homeless Empowerment Project. Oh, I'm sorry. That was when Lindsay was a Jesuit volunteer. She worked for the Real Change Homelessness Empowerment Project. While at St. Joe's, Lindsay worked for the Hawk newspaper. She did as the opinion senator. She served as student leader for the Winter Immersion Program, the Magis Program, and a faith sharing program, and participated in the Appalachian Experience, Chapel Choir, and weekly service. I am delighted to welcome Lindsay back to Hawk Hill. Thank you, Lindsay.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here and talk to you all.
First of all, I think I'm missing some of your majors and minors. So do you want to clarify that?
Yeah, so I double majored in English and French, and then I also had 2 minors. One was in faith justice studies and the other in LEO, which is leadership, ethics, and organizational sustainability.
Okay. So a major in both arts and sciences and a major in the business school. Minor in the business school.
Major, yeah, minor.
Okay. I think you really took advantage of everything St. Joe's has to offer, pretty much.
I tried, yeah.
Could you describe a typical day in your current role, the core responsibilities, and what a typical day or week looks like for you?
Yeah, good question. So again, I work at the National Alliance to End Homelessness. So just a brief overview of our organization. So I'm based in DC, or our organization is based in DC. I live there as well. And we focus on ending homelessness, particularly on a federal level through different policies and practices. So our organization has a few different areas that we work in. So one is a main focus, policy and advocacy. So communicating with different members of Congress or people in the executive branch about different policies or funding for homelessness. And then we also do research on homelessness. So looking at different data, different trends, things that certain subpopulations of people experiencing homelessness, looking at what is happening there. And then we also we call it our capacity building team. So we contract with different communities across the country, different homeless service providers to look at their homeless service systems, see how effective they're being, areas that they can improve on, different courses and learning. So I work in communications, so I talk about all of that to the general public, but more specifically, policymakers, leaders in the homelessness field, folks in the media as well. So with that, I right now started I started in a more general digital communication space and have progressed to doing more specific editorial work. So for my job, that means I kind of joke, like I work with anything with words. So that could range from some blog posts to social media, both writing, generating, scheduling posts. We have a weekly newsletter that goes out, so I write and edit that as well, but also some larger publications like different research reports or briefs, things like that. We also had an advocacy action go out around congressional funding this week. So have been working up with our policy and advocacy folks to write that, edit that, get that out the door. So it kind of depends on the week, but those are some of the main things that I am involved in or that I do on a daily and weekly basis.
It seems like you have a nice variety of things that you do.
Yeah, it's a real spectrum. And what's really nice is I get to work with each team. So I get to see, what the research team is doing and how that intersects with what the policy team is doing to kind of paint an overall picture of progress on ending homelessness. So
So how did you decide to pursue this career?
good question. So I have always been interested in housing and homelessness issues. So I knew that I wanted to be in that field. When I was in college, as was mentioned, I did the Jesuit Volunteer Corps Northwest. So I was super involved in a lot of service and social justice activities at St. Joe's, both with weekly service and some longer immersion trips, things like that. So I kind of figured I would just do JVC Northwest and then figure it out from there. So that's kind of what I've been doing. But when I lived in Seattle, worked directly with people on the streets there in a direct service position. So both from that and from experiences at St. Joe's with different service and service learning opportunities, knew I wanted to stay within the homelessness field. But so that's always been an interest. And then parallel to that, I was an English major. I worked in the writing center. I was an editor at the Hawk. And so I also wanted to develop my writing and communication skills. So was mainly looking for a career that could kind of combine both of them. So have been, working with that and specifically within communications in the homelessness field. So have been able to kind of combine both of those.
Thanks. That's so great. What has surprised you most about your current job?
Yeah, a lot. I think even though I have had an understanding of what homelessness looks like, both in Philly and Seattle, nationwide, there's always something I'm still learning about, both, on a national level and for specific best practices and things, learning all the time from my coworkers about different policies or practices around homelessness and what that looks like. And also, how much variety there is within that. So lots to learn. In general, a thing that surprised me was I didn't think I'd be working in like a policy related space. It's just kind of where I've landed and where I've fallen into. I was not really interested in, political science or anything like politics, government related, but it's kind of the avenue that I found myself in right now. So I'm really enjoying it.
Thank you for that. And how did you get your first internship or job?
Yeah. Internship, I think. So I interned for the Archdiocese of Philadelphia right when Pope Francis was coming to Philly. That was right before my senior year of college. So the summer before that was looking for some internships, and I believe it was Dr. Spinner I was talking with about, where other writing center people or English majors had looked for internships or gotten internships. And I think she had sent me a list, or there was some sort of list that I was looking, and had reached out to a few different places. And again, I knew that I wanted something more on a nonprofit level or something related to social justice issues. So I thought that interning with the Archdiocese would be really cool to see, how a major national, international news media event would happen. So got to work with that team in preparing different press releases or events for Pope Francis's visit prior. But it was really just about I was curious about what was out there and didn't really know where to start. So just started asking the people around me who then had suggestions or other people to talk to or connect me with. So really just started with asking some questions about what I was interested in and what I wanted to learn and going from there.
Did you get to meet the Pope? Sidebar question.
Not personally. I saw him from afar, but there were students on St. Joe's campus who did meet the Pope when he came to campus, but I was
I waved at him from
yeah.
Wilmington. So how does your organization work with diversity, equity, and inclusion? How does it prioritize that?
Yeah, so in general, homelessness is an issue that has a lot of inequity. And a lot of roots of homelessness come from systemic discrimination, inequality, racism, sexism, homophobia. A lot of factors converge into creating what we know as homelessness today. So from its very root, there's a lot of equity issues in homelessness. So our organization does a handful of things both internally and externally to work on those issues. So externally, there's a huge racial disproportionality in homelessness among several different races. And so not only pointing that out and recognizing it, but analyzing the data and encouraging homeless service providers and communities across the country to look at their data as well and say, if we have more Black people experiencing homelessness percentage wise than we do, like if the rate is higher than it should be, or if there are more Latino people experiencing homelessness, why is that? How can we, reduce those disparities? So we have a racial equity network of different providers across the country who are interested in examining their data, looking at that. So in contact with those folks as well. Internally, we also do some racial equity trainings and work. I'm on the racial equity committee, so we have different all staff discussions or small group discussions, articles both related to and not related to our work to foster those conversations. So those are a few small examples, but yeah.
Yeah, no, those are great. When you were on St. Joe's campus, or what do you wish someone had told you when you were an undergraduate?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, was very much like a rule follower and also wanted to, I had a vision or a path for myself. And I wanted to, as you mentioned, like take advantage of a lot of things that I did. But I also think I wish I would take advantage of things that I didn't think I would like, if that makes any sort of sense. So I mentioned earlier, I had no interest in political science or anything like that, but maybe taking a class in that could have helped me and could have helped have a broader understanding. Or I was super involved in service and social justice, but maybe some sort of other club or activity. So I think stretching myself in those ways could have been really helpful, and seeing people from different perspectives, meeting different people on St. Joe's campus. But also, yeah, to really find what you're curious about and what you want to learn more about, and let that guide where you go.
And so what are 2 or 3 things you'd recommend that students do to get that first job or the second job or the job they want while they're
Yeah, I would say if there's a professor or staff member on campus who you are close with or talk to, and or maybe has an area of expertise that you're interested in learning more about, reach out to them, even just to ask questions about their field or about what they're teaching, or if they know anyone in the Philly area or outside of it who's involved in that work. I think just starting to ask those questions allows you to open up and see what else is out there, not just outside of St. Joe's campus, but outside of Philly and elsewhere as well. So I think asking those questions, and sorry, what was the question? Where should people start?
Yeah, or what kind of experiences should they look for?
Yeah, I think also getting off campus and into the city, into wherever, is really helpful. At least for me, I took 2 service learning classes at St. Joe's, and that was I found really fascinating to combine those real world type of social justice issues that I had seen in other service areas, and then combine that with classwork to see how that was integrating. Yeah, I also did a few different service immersion trips where I got to do a deeper dive into some issues. One I led my senior year of college was to El Paso, Texas. So spent a week there learning about different immigration issues, and from really different perspectives of people and agencies working around immigration and around border things. So even though that's not directly related to what I'm doing in my work or my life, it still shaped my perspectives and shaped my understanding, and still informs how I view the world and view even smaller intersections with my work. But it's not just about work. It's also, forming how you see the world and how you interact with that. And you bring all of those things to work anyways. So, yeah, getting outside your comfort zone or doing something that you might not normally do. It sounds like a really cheesy piece of advice, but like I found that even just stepping outside of your normal routine is really helpful as well.
Yeah, I think you're in a room that you can't see with a bunch of service learning students who are stepping outside their comfort zones for sure. Were there English courses in particular that stand out for you that helped you prepare for what you're doing now or that changed your worldview?
Yeah, I would say the first one I can think of is working in the writing center. So taking the class and then actually working in the writing center. I think for my specific role right now, as I mentioned, I work with a whole bunch of different teams. So that requires, an understanding of different projects, different writing styles, different experiences and perspectives, and different ways that people come to this work. So it's having to tailor my responses and the way that I view my work to each individual and each team. And that's very similar to what I did at the Writing Center, learning different strategies, learning how to provide guidance on different approaches to writing or editing and how to review things. So I found that really helpful, just in a practical, professional sense. But I also took the Inside Out course my senior year. So actually with Dr. Green. So we went to I'm blanking on the name, but it's in Philly. It was in North Philly or Northeast.
It would be either the Philadelphia Industrial Correction Center or the CFCF, which is another jail.
Yeah, I think it might have been that one. Regardless, seeing how these real life tangible issues and putting names and faces with people and their experiences, and getting to talk and form connections with people on the inside there, and just hearing their stories and how that intersects with what I understood or what my classmates understood to be the issues, I found really impactful.
What other things did you do? Internships, honors thesis, service learning courses, study abroad, other experiential learning that helped you prepare or, enter the world as a fully prepared person?
Yeah, I check a lot of those boxes. So I studied abroad the fall semester of my junior year in Lyon, France. And I don't know, I haven't looked at St. Joe's study abroad programs recently, but that program actually wasn't one that St. Joe's had officially listed. So I wanted a more immersive and deeper experience than I think Paris was the only option, which would have been fine. But I knew that if I went there, people would automatically speak English to me, or it might not be as easy to fully immerse myself. So wanted something a bit more, where I could get a deeper look into some things. So that program was actually through UVA. So I reached out to them and reached out to the St. Joe Study Abroad office and put together a course load and made the credits work. But it was funny because it wasn't an option really. And I looked into different programs and I took most of my classes in French and stayed with a host family, and all of that. And so if there's something you want to do, but it's not exactly 100% what St. Joe's currently has, it's worth asking and worth figuring out. So I did that. I also, led some service immersion trips and participated on them. I did do an honors thesis my senior year for the English department. It was about, the official title was Evolving Perceptions of Homelessness in Literature. So compared and contrasted post Great Depression era literature with post 2008 financial crisis things going on, and seeing how ultimately race, class, and gender were reflected differently in following those two periods of time in literature, media, culture, all of that. So yeah, service learning classes I also did. There are probably a handful of other experiential learning opportunities as well that I participated in. But yeah, I found that the more perspectives and the more different perspectives I surrounded myself with, the more that I was able to learn and ask questions on my own and kind of understand and figure out where I'm going and where I wanted to be. And I still don't have that figured out yet. It helped to give me a direction of where to start and what kind of things I might be interested in, or places where I might want to go after I left St. Joe's.
Uh, so what advice would you give students about the job market and about preparing?
Yeah, I feel like at least when I was in college, I wasn't immediately worried about getting a job. Not that I wasn't worried about it, but it wasn't like I was focusing on that aspect every single day or year or anything. I think for me, when I was in college, I wasn't totally sure what I wanted to do afterwards. Like I said, like did JVC and figured I would work for a nonprofit and kind of figure it out. But I followed what I was passionate about, which again sounds kind of hokey, but like followed what I knew that I wanted to work in, and also tried to align that with the skills that I knew I had and was developing. So I think, listen to what you are, what fulfills you and what you're really excited to do every day. And I think that will really help. The path will open up to you. Again, sounds kind of corny, but like the more that you develop the skills and the interests, the more people you'll meet, the more, topics you'll learn, and broaden your view in that way. But yeah, I think, to be curious and to be open, and to not be afraid to also make mistakes or ask questions, because it's not going to be a perfect path for that. And I think also, yeah, a job is a job, and you can, a job that you don't have to have it forever. You can change jobs, you can shift your path. Like I said, I didn't think I would be here in DC or working in any sort of policy space. If you had told me that in college, I'd be like, that's wild. I'm not doing that. So I think just being open to different possibilities, and if there's something you're interested in, leaning into that. And I've also found that, people are generally pretty open. If there's someone in your field or someone at an organization that you're interested in talking to, it seems really scary to do, but reach out for some sort of informational interview or just getting coffee with someone. Like, people are happy to talk about their work and usually happy to bring other people up with them. So, sounds super intimidating, but even people have reached out to me, and of course happy to talk about, my work and my job and what I'm doing. So yeah.
That's great. For those who don't know, can you say a little bit about what JVC is and why you decided to make that decision right after college?
Yeah, I should have said that earlier. So thank you. So JVC, so the Jesuit Volunteer Corps Northwest, is a year-long volunteer program, year of service program that folks do usually after graduating college or within a few years of graduating college. So it is a year-long volunteer program in that people in the program are placed at typically a social service agency or related to social justice, and also live in community with other folks in the program. So for JVC Northwest, there were a few different pillars of community, spirituality, social justice, ecological justice. So we had all common ground in doing that. And I lived in Seattle and worked at Homeless Services Agency, and some other people in my house did too. So we were able to talk about that at the end of the day. And we also, simple living is one of the tenants. So we also lived on a pretty tight budget of $200 a month per person. So so you learn to manage and really be in solidarity, I found, with the folks that I was serving as well. And the $200, it didn't include like groceries or rent or whatever. That was just for me personally. But yeah, I think it really changed the way that I think about poverty and think about money and experiences. Having, done that for a short period earlier on, really pushing myself to see what that looks like for people who that's their everyday reality. So it also allowed me to really build relationships with people, not just in the community with my housemates and with other people in the area, but with the people that I was serving every day. So I got to know them and their stories and, things that they loved, things that they hated, or, places that they needed help with, or other agencies that they were, trying to get help from, things like that. So I still am connected to some of them and talk to them sometimes through Facebook or otherwise. But yeah, I think really relationship building was at the heart of that. And so being able to take those stories of different people and different life experiences, and particularly now I think of those people and the, experiences or moments that I had working in more direct services, and carrying those to the homelessness policy space and thinking of, how will this bad policy directly impact this person that I knew? So it brings a very real and human aspect to that.
Thank you. How else does your Jesuit education influence your work? I mean, it seems very directly related. You're working with social justice all the time.
Yeah.
You're going to speak to that a little more.
Yeah, I think overall, the Jesuit tradition has made me think more holistically about issues, in the very, cura personalis Jesuit kind of way. So, which means care of the whole person. So thinking about issues not just, as a work issue or as a social issue or things like that, but how those are all integrated, and how caring for each person helps to integrate that. So I think for me, as I mentioned, I wasn't just involved in the Writing Center or the Hawk, or just involved in campus ministry. I tried to find a way to integrate all of those. But I also think that something that I think about and try to emulate on a daily basis is this idea of servant leadership or Ignatian leadership, which I learned a lot about in one of Dr. Dufresne's courses for the Leo minor. So really thinking about how not just to be in service to others, but to do so while you're leading. And while I don't have a formal position of leadership at work, there are things that I can do within the workplace or outside of the workplace in my community that allow me to see people as people. And that's what comes first and foremost. And then how do we do our work? How do we accomplish our mission with that? And so being able to see where other people are and how we can all grow together, I think has been really important. And incorporating different aspects of social justice and solidarity throughout my work, and really, centering people who are most marginalized or most against. I think at my organization, we also more recently, but have been incorporating a lot of voices of people with lived experience of homelessness. So people who are either currently or formerly homeless, and understanding that their input is really important into making this work. And it doesn't make sense to design systems or solutions that might not work for the people who need them. So ensuring that we have people's life experiences and taking that into account. And I think that also plays into that aspect of, centering and lifting up the voices of people who are at the heart of the issue and seeing what we can do with that.
Thank you. Our next question is, we're going to talk a little bit about interviewing and networking.
Sure.
For those of you who have questions, you can start putting them in the chat, because after we talk about interviewing and networking, we're going to take some questions from the audience. So do you have any tips for how to effectively interview and you've mentioned stuff about networking, like the informational cup of coffee with someone to see if they like their field. Do you want to build on that a little bit?
Yeah. I think in terms of interviewing, it's always really helpful to think of questions beforehand that you would like to ask the interviewer. whether that's questions that you have about the job or the organization as a whole, but also asking really specific questions throughout the interview as well. Like, I remember when I interviewed here at the Alliance, our chief operating officer had also worked at like a faith-based organization. So I said, like, how was that transition for you? And so thinking of people's specific experiences and how that, how you can learn more with that in mind. And yeah, I think also networking, depending on where you are. DC does have a lot of different networking events and other things, but a lot of things happen through word of mouth too. So if there's a friend or a roommate, or it's funny, we recently hired a coworker who I went to St. Joe's with and hadn't connected with them in a few years. And so it was really cool to reconnect. And so reaching out to people who you might know or might see. And we had connected prior to them being hired, and just being, oh, we're both in DC. We should, catch up, hang out. From there, you can really build a lot of strong relationships. And it's ultimately relationships and people who will give you insight and perspective on, whatever next step you'd like to take, or if there's a new opportunity, things like that. Or, friends and coworkers have sent me different links or things once they knew I was interested in learning more about X, or trying to incorporate more of Y into my job and career. So I don't know if that's helpful, or if there are any more specific tips, interview wise or networking wise.
Thank you. I think we can, if people have questions, they can ask them in the chat. And you can also, if you're on the call, you can use the raise hand function, and we can unmute you. I can call on you. And when you speak, if you could just say your name and your year at St. Joe's, that would be great. I see we have a couple of questions in the chat, so flip over to there. Did you find it more difficult to find internships as an English major compared to other majors?
I was never another major, so I don't know exactly what other people's experiences were. I think particularly for business students or people with a more specialized type of lens, I feel like there are more, or at least to me, it seemed like it might have been easier to just, take an internship with a company over the summer or something like that. So I wouldn't necessarily say it was harder. I think it's more tailored to what you are looking to learn and looking to find out. I had a friend who at St. Joe's who interned for a PR firm over the summer. But I knew that I wanted to do something a little bit more mission driven and more, social justice related. So I was looking more at nonprofits or things like that. And so I wouldn't say it's harder. I think because the English major can be so flexible and so applicable to so many different types of careers. I think it depends on where you even have an inkling of being interested in and following that. It's not quite as easy to say, okay, here's an accounting internship or something like that for an English major. But I think if there are different skills you're looking to learn more about, whether that's, more PR related things or journalism or other types of writing and communications, start with that and see where you can go.
Thank you. The chat is lighting up. Feel free to raise your hand.
I see that.
But the next question is from Maggie. Do you wish you took a different major or different minor or double major?
That's a good question. I'm going to say no, because I started as an English major, and I was actually interested in education when I was coming to St. Joe's. And at the time, I was interested in doing an English major with a secondary ed minor, but that would have taken up pretty much all of my coursework. So I said, I'll wait and see if I really want to do that, and then if I want to. And so I just ended up adding things. I never changed majors. I just kept adding different majors and minors. But I think having them be across different disciplines. With the faith justice studies minor, there were courses in philosophy and sociology and a few other disciplines. So I think having that really broad foundation was helpful for me. And I got to learn about a lot of different things. So I wouldn't change it. I think I learned very different things from each of those academic disciplines. That's helped to inform my skills and the way that I think and work in the world. But I don't think I would have changed it. No. Yeah.
I also think that like you should do what you love and then you figure out the job later because you do better if you pick something
Yeah.
that you're interested in.
Yeah.
And going to France was amazing, an amazing part of your journey. Tina asks, is there anything you would have done differently? Things you now have more knowledge of and wish you did instead?
Yeah. This is just for me personally. But I feel like I just did way too much in college. Like I know that can come off as really impressive or whatnot, but like the reality is I was tired and burnt out half the time and probably could have cut back on a few things. So just overall, even though, yeah, I was successful and, was involved in a lot, I think just for my own like health and sanity, probably could have done less. So not saying do less, but I think in terms of, I felt that I had to do everything and check every box and take advantage of everything, which is really great and helpful and led me to a lot of different experiences. But at the same time, I think prioritizing, what you're really most interested in, or don't feel like you have to do something just because it's expected of you, or just because someone in your major is involved in it, or one of your friends is involved in it. I think evaluating like what you're doing outside of the classroom and why you're doing it was really helpful for me. And I don't think I quite saw that when I was in college, but reflecting back now, I'm like, oh, I was really busy and really tired just all of the time.
I think for a lot of people, it's good to start out with and do a lot of different things. But then by the time you're in your junior and senior year, you can narrow your focus a little bit. Because you're right, like when people are really tired, it's hard for them to take advantage of like full advantage of each different thing. Thanks, Tina, for that question. Noelle's question is, when do you think the most important time is to get an internship? Should you be looking for one this summer going into junior year, or wait until after my junior year is complete?
I think that's a good question. It really just depends on how much time you have during the semester. I did my internship during the summer and a little bit into senior year for a couple weeks, but I really enjoyed doing it over the summer because that gave me time during the summer to learn and to have that space free and also do other things and classwork and things on campus. But I think, yeah, it was it was right before my senior year. And I felt that that was a good enough time to have a sense of what I was interested in learning and also develop some skills on my own, both, writing and just general, ability to understand and manage time and manage different projects, things like that. So I don't think you immediately need to get an internship freshman year or sophomore year, but I also don't think you need to like overload it as well.
Ava asks, do you think that pursuing the JBC program set you back in your professional world compared to people who went right from college into the workforce? Or do you think it gave you more perspective that benefited your ability to work in the field you're in?
That's a really great question. For me, absolutely the latter. So I think it really, so I moved from Philly to Seattle, had never been to Seattle before moving there. So total like leap of faith all across the country. So that in and of itself is scary. And you learn a lot about yourself and the way that you can function and depend on other people is really important. But I think in terms of professional skills, I have been able to use different experiences or different skills that I've learned in that setting in a variety of workplaces and talk about them, not just in interviews, but in daily life and projects. Or, I mean, there's a pretty direct tie to the work that I do now with homelessness policy to, people and organizations and things that I saw when I was living in Seattle working in direct services and homelessness. And so I feel like that specific tie has been really evident in my professional life. And I think it's also like taught me a lot of skills, not just like professional skills in the work that I was doing, but how to work with different types of people, how to be flexible and adaptive. In Seattle, when I got to work every day, like I didn't know who was going to walk through the door. I had to be ready for anyone to come in off the street, no matter what mood they were in or what they needed that day, things like that. So also taught me a lot of flexibility and adaptability. And I think those are skills that transfer anywhere, not just in a policy space, in a homelessness space, in, a writing journalism-y space, but overall, I think that experience has really given me a lot. And even though it's been several years, it's still something that I think about overall. So.
Thanks. We have a lot of questions coming in, and we're gonna go until about 1:20. So I'm gonna give as many questions as I
Yeah,
can.
I can also like answer some via email as well, if that's helpful, to send the questions to me afterwards, and happy to answer as many as we can right now, but then as many afterwards too.
Thank you. We really appreciate your time. And anyone who wants to reach out, Lindsay is on LinkedIn. So you could reach out via LinkedIn as well. The next question is, did you have to reach out to the school to get support in finding a job after graduation, or get the support without asking? That's from Kat.
Hmm. So I mean, it's a bit different for me because right after graduating, I knew that I was doing JVC Northwest in Seattle, so I would be moving there. But ultimately that was only a year. And so I wasn't totally sure. I thought that I was going to live in Seattle afterwards and had applied for some jobs there, but didn't pan out. And so I ended up moving back to the East Coast, lived with my parents for a few months in the suburbs of Philly, and was applying for jobs, and ended up applying for this fellowship at Network Lobby for Catholic Social Justice. And that's how I ended up moving to DC. So I think in retrospect, I don't believe I reached out to anyone at St. Joe's. I was in that time period when I was searching for jobs in the interim. I was pretty stubborn and independent and wanted to do it all on my own. But I think I probably should have asked for more help and more guidance, now that I think about it. But yeah, I think I would advise leveraging all of the resources that you have, because people are willing to help you out. And I've had a former coworker who I haven't talked to in a year or so reach out to me for a reference or other things. So people are more willing than you think to help you. So, and that includes St. Joe's and the Career Center and everything as well.
Thank you. I think we'll do two more questions before we need to end. So one is from Dr. Wetzel. Since leaving college, have you adopted any strategies, habits, or practices to keep your writing and speaking skills strong? And relatedly, do you have recommendations for students in the audience from other majors on how to make writing development a priority throughout college?
That is a really great question. I think personally, so when I was working in direct services in Seattle, which was my first, job. I mean, it was a year-long volunteer position, but it was still a job. Even though I was working in direct services, we actually had a newspaper component. It's a bit of a difficult model to explain, but it's called a street paper. There's one in Philly called One Step Away. The one that I worked at was called Real Change in Seattle. So that model, so we had a few journalists on staff, and then people experiencing homelessness would sell the paper on the street. So would buy a copy of the paper for 60 cents, sell it for $2, and keep the difference. So it's a job, it was an income. And so one thing that I took on there was we had a different weekly vendor profile. So I would meet with vendors and interview them, and ended up writing several articles for the paper. So that was one opportunity that wasn't explicitly present, but that I knew I wanted to continue working on writing, and so sought that out. I think also I mean, personally, I like to journal. And so I think just the act of writing, even if it's not for someone or for anything, can be the more you write, the easier it gets. And what was the second part of the question?
Let me scroll back a minute. Oh, how to make writing development a priority throughout college, well,
Yeah.
regardless of your major.
Yeah. So I, not to be an ad for the Writing Center, but definitely visit the Writing Center. It's not, I think that really changed my perspective when I was a tutor there, because it's not just if you need help with your paper. Like, I half the time would brainstorm things with people, or people would come and wouldn't have a full idea of what they wanted to write about, but we could sketch an outline. So it's more than just like, all right, here's my paper, like edit it. Does it sound good? Does it flow? I've learned that writing is really a process, and it's not just, the act of putting words down, but there's a lot more strategy and thought that goes into things. And that applies not just at school or in more communications-based professions, but writing, I found, especially in this role, is a really important skill that you need anywhere. And if you can't write and if you can't communicate about things, nothing is going to change, and no one's going to understand, what you need or why your work is important, or all of those things. So I think in my role, I get to work with a lot of different staff members who are experts in different issues and have to tailor that. So the one thing I found is, like, writing is really important. And I love working with a bunch of different writers, but being a strong writer will help you. No matter what field you're in, because you're able to clearly and concisely communicate what you need, what you're asking for, and demonstrate those ideas through your work. So throughout college, I would say, also, again, this sounds strange, but asking for feedback too. It's uncomfortable to put yourself in that position for sure, but in terms of improving and strengthening, asking either a friend or a professor or someone at, with Writing Center, just asking, like, how can I improve, or how can I make this sound more at what I'm trying to explain, has been helpful for me.
Great. Our last question comes from Olga. What part of your education, may it be from your major or anything else, that you value the most? So which piece of your education do you value the most? A skill or task that made a big impact on you and helped you learn something significant from, and that you could later apply to the real world or work?
Mm, yeah. I think to the first part of the question, um, to put it very broadly, just like experiential learning, I found. Um, I think as much as I learned inside the classroom, I learned the same, if not more, outside of it, and getting to apply concepts or theories or things that I, saw through writing or homework or whatnot, seeing them out in the world, whether that was in Philly or in different locations for service trips or other things. So I think that was the most important component. I know we're short on time, so I forget, what was the second part of the question?
The second part was a skill or tasks that made a big impact and helped, that you learned something significant from, and that you could later apply to the real world of work.
Mm. I think this is a very, like, intangible type of thing, but just really getting to know the people around you and in front of you, even if it seems like a quick hello or small talk conversation is really daunting sometimes, not just coworkers, but other people. I think it really helps to, again, build relationships with people, because when you have a relationship with people, they're more willing to work with you, and it's easier to find solutions because you already know each other a little bit and you can work together. And so, um, at least for me, I think, yeah, being a good listener as well is really important. Um, and listening before you act, or before you speak, and really understanding what the person in front of you is trying to say or communicate. and then giving advice or suggestions from there. I think is really important to not just immediately, come in with your own opinion, but to fully understand all the other opinions and experiences from people around you, will ultimately help you build a bigger picture of what I know I'm speaking very vaguely, but a bigger picture of what you're trying to accomplish. And then, yeah, also helps just inform the work overall.
Please, everyone, you can join me in thanking Lindsay for joining us today. You can use that little reaction button at the bottom. And thank you for giving us such great insight into your career. We are grateful for your time, and we hope that you can come back and see us in person soon.